Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today we're going to be talking about the spring patch. This just came out. I'm going to be giving you my initial impressions on it, and the first thing I gotta say is that this is less like a patch and more like a mini DLC because we're getting 5 new guns and a new game mode. This game mode here is Gunmaster, and the specific server I'm playing on has it limited to pistols only, so we're switching between different handguns while playing the Gunmaster game mode, which is 2 kills per each weapon, and then it switches you to a new weapon. The first player to a certain number of kills, I think it's like 30 or 31 kills, wins the round. I believe servers can also now customize the weapon progression, so you can create your own custom Gunmaster list, and this will keep the game mode more interesting and probably give it a lot more longevity than the one in Battlefield 3 had. Now, all things considered though, there's a lot of huge changes in this patch. Aside from the new weapons, we're getting massive updates to the netcode, tweaks to weapon balance, weapon damage. The basic damage models have been tweaked. Shotguns have had a major overhaul. This is probably one of the bigger patches that we're going to see with this game. I've probably said that a couple times, but there have been some massive patches to Battlefield 4. It's taken a long time to try and find its feet as a game, to try and figure out what kind of game it wants to be, and also to deal with a lot of bigger issues that the game has had. So it's gone through some pretty big changes, and this is again one of the bigger ones. Let's begin with the basics. Spotting has always been a key part of Battlefield, and it's always been pretty easy to spot your opponent. This kind of made it a bad situation when somebody was trying to say hide in some foliage and somebody was just spamming the Q button in their general direction and it popped you up. This should not be as easy anymore. Spotting has to be a much more precise mechanic. You basically have to be looking directly at the person and then hit the Q button and it will spot them. The further away your target, the more precise you have to be. This is going to be a big deal for people, say, flying airplanes and stuff like that. You're going to have to rely a lot more on your teammates spotting enemies on the ground for you to shoot rather than you spotting them from the air. It's just going to be much more difficult. And this change also applies to passive spotting. You're going to have to be much more accurate when spotting someone passively so that your teammates can see them. So basically, spotting should be harder now. It's only going to happen if you definitely see the target and not be used as a way to locate enemies by just hitting Q in an area where you think they might be. Head glitching has also been addressed in this patch. Basically, your bullets now spawn lower, closer to where the gun barrel is. So in situations where you're shooting over an object, you might notice, especially when you're right up against that object and barely peeking over it, that your shots are going to actually go into the object rather than shooting at your target. This is a much more realistic way to play video games. Lots of video games avoid it because it causes aggravation in the shooter, but what Battlefield has decided to do instead is to avoid aggravation from being killed by people head glitching and rather train people how to shoot over objects a little bit more realistically in this video game. And I'm a big fan of this change. We'll have to see what the long-term effects of it are. You might also notice that the gameplay in the netcode seems a bit more responsive. There have been a lot of changes that have gone into this during the spring patch. I don't know what all of them are specifically. I know they've been messing around with a ton of different things, but overall I have to say that everything feels much snappier, and this is probably the best Battlefield 4 has ever been. Now let's talk about the weapon updates. It is a massive list. There's no way I can possibly tell you everything that they've done in this video. Even if it was 40 minutes long, there's just too many damn changes to go over, but what I can do is give you the best generalization of what they've done. The first thing I want to talk about is shotguns. If you haven't used shotguns in a long time, go back and try them out. They are way freaking better. What they've done is they've made shotguns much more consistent. They've increased the pellet count per shot and reduced the damage per pellet, so you get a much more even spread of pellets this time around. They've also increased your hipfire accuracy significantly. I recommend trying just running with a naked 870 or Spaz 12 and hip firing all day and just noticing how much more accurate and responsive the weapon is. It's actually a lot of fun to use pump action shotguns now. It even felt reminiscent of Battlefield 3 glory days where you could sneak up behind a few squads and wipe them all out with your pump action because it just did so much damage and was a very consistent close quarter weapon. They're so much fun to use now, and I plan on using them a lot more. Now, how about the overall damage model and what you should be aiming for as a soldier? They've put a much bigger emphasis on getting headshots. Headshots used to have a 2.0 multiplier, now they have a 2.13 multiplier, which means that you can now two-shot somebody in the head in close quarters. They've also increased the starting drop-off for most guns in the game. This is assault rifles, carbines, PDWs. A lot of them have had their damage drop-off increased, so that means your two-shot headshot shot range has been increased pretty extensively for some weapons out to like 20 meters or more. Now PDWs have also seen a lot of love. You're going to see that their damage drop off has increased significantly. Their maximum range drop off on a lot of them has actually come down, so there's basically now a sweet spot with PDWs where you're going to be able to do a massive amount of damage in close to medium range, and beyond that you're going to be doing next to nothing, which is the way I think that PDWs should be operating. And this update would have been a really big benefit for PDWs had most of the other guns in the game not also seen a pretty big increase to their damage drop off. So assault rifles and carbines almost universally have seen a very big improvement. Now when scanning through the massive list of weapon changes that you can find on simthick.com, I noticed one thing that would seem to be applied to just about all automatic weapons universally, and that is that your accuracy is returning to normal at a slower rate, which is going to make basically burst firing your weapons a little bit harder. This isn't a huge change, it's a very subtle change, but if you're noticing any differences in your overall accuracy and you like to do a lot of burst firing or tap firing, and it's not quite as effective now, that might be why. Overall, this might slow down the combat a little bit and make you basically pay more attention or be a little bit more cautious when you start burst firing at a target. Before, there wasn't much penalty for missing an entire burst at your opponent. You could just reset and burst again to get a hit. This time around, it seems like you're going to be penalized a little bit for that, so I would say it just makes more sense to take a little bit more time and make sure that your first round of fire is actually on target. And when I say burst fire, I don't mean the actual select fire mode of burst firing, but just when you're doing like 3 to 4 to 5 round bursts with any weapon. Now of course we have the 5 new weapons in this patch. A real quick overview on them. The AN-94 is a fun 2-round burst gun. I don't think it's going to impress anybody in terms of just the competitive nature of the rifle. I would much rather have something that shoots fully automatic. The L86A2 light machine gun is just something that I don't really care for. It feels like kind of a mediocre assault rifle, not that great. I would much rather just have a light machine gun instead of that one. The Grozas are interesting. I haven't made up my mind on them yet. They do have a high damage potential, but they seem kind of limited to more like a close to medium range engagement, and definitely more of an emphasis on the closer range engagement given a very, very slow bullet velocity. The Mare's Leg is a fun little sniper rifle sidearm, definitely nowhere near as powerful as your traditional bolt action rifle, but it'll be a decent medium range weapon. At long range, you're really going to have to put a lot of rounds into your target, at which point it barely becomes worthwhile. But I really do like the Mare's Leg as a sidearm. It certainly adds a bit of flair to the game. Now, of course, this patch isn't perfect. I'm still crashing with the game, even with the latest video card drivers. I'd say I'm probably crashing as much as I did before the patch before this. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough for me to take issue with. Gunmaster screws with your gun loadouts in normal game modes, and that's something that's really aggravating. Aggravating enough for me to not want to play Gunmaster, so I don't have to reconvert all my weapons back to the way that I like when I play the normal game. TDM spawns were barely touched, and that's always been one of my bigger issues with the game, is just having bad spawn algorithms in the team deathmatch game mode and basically bad spawn placements at the beginning of rounds. Beyond that, there's a ton of new stuff going on in this patch, and I will be covering it in more depth in future videos. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Levelcapped signing off.